So Skyfall, being a Bond film, is heavy effect oriented, so there is probably a lot of CGI work done in post.
Yeah,
what had been the effect supervisors and people in saying about Alexa captured images?
That was interesting because Steve, the effects guy, was going to shoot, this division, whatever. He was going to do it traditionally. He'd not shot with any digital camera. He'd seen one of the other cameras that he wasn't too impressed with. And I said we were shooting on the Alexa, and he said, oh, I'll go and do some tests. And he shot a whole range of tests, explosions and landscapes, and he said, he came back to me, he said, I'm going to shoot everything on the Alexa. I'm going to do all the plate work, everything on the Alexa. And he's never had an issue with it, and I think the effects are really good. I mean, most of the film, I mean, there's always the action, and Sam Mendes, the director, was very intent that as much as possible was done in camera. So there's no stunt sequences, as it were, where the character's been CG created, I mean, most of it is done. Daniel's done his own stunts. So for the most part, the actors are actually there, or the stunt guys are there. And most of it is background placements, and obviously there's green screen work for some stunt stuff, for some effects work. But yeah, Steve was really impressed with the camera when he'd done the test, and all the effects work is done on the Alexa now. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the most challenging and demanding shots you used the Alexas in this picture for?
Not really. I mean, I think for me, a film like that is the most demanding thing. It's just the schedule and just the whole thing, just keeping it together, But no, it's interesting because we did the whole gamut between, I mean, probably most of the film was shot one camera, like we were doing a regular drama. But then on other scenes, there's a little clip in there with a train crashing through this ceiling of a great big set. Well, we had 11 cameras there, doing this one big stunt. And actually, the sequence is really good. We had 11 cameras, and every camera worked really well. So they've used every shot, I think, in the final cut. It's really good. But, it was like just such a variety of stuff. And then the whole opening sequence is this very long, extended chase sequence, and there's lots of car work on tops of trains and all sorts of stuff. So it's just a variety of it, That was the difficulty. Was, keeping up with it, but also maintaining a sort of a uniformity, a continuity from within the scenes, because obviously some of the early stuff's second unit, and there's quite a bit of second unit and model work and effects work, and just maintaining a kind of consistency to the film. That's the hardest thing, really.
So you used as a main camera the studio, and I do remember that we had several conversations about Ari needs to make a studio camera. Yeah. And I probably need to go back. When we started the design of the Alexa, we had 3 cameras in mind. One was the studio, the other was a camera like the Plus, and then there was an entry model. And unfortunately, we all remember we started seeing the financial crisis, and we reversed the availability. So we started first, unlikely with Ari, not with the top model. We started with the entry model, and then later the Plus. And then we considered, is there really a market and a demand for an optical viewfinder-based camera? And we had various kinds of opinions, and I had a very strong opinion from your side and from some of your colleagues, but I need to say only from DPs who operate the camera themselves. And maybe if you share what difference it makes for you to have an optical viewfinder in respect to an okay or as good as possible electronic viewfinder.
I think part of it is where your history and where you come from. I was talking to a young cameraman yesterday in the hall there, and he said he much preferred the electronic viewfinder. He much preferred seeing the waveform, knowing if his highlights were clipping, and I couldn't imagine ever watching that while I was shooting. I just like the clarity of the image. I like seeing exactly what's in front of me because that's how I light, and that's, you know, I like watching an actor's face. That's the most important thing to me, is watching the face and how the light falls on the face, and you just can't do it with a electronic viewfinder yet. The color's off, and then the panning and strobing, and I find that operating the camera at the end of the day, I'd have eye strain from the electronic viewfinder. So, I mean, I found on In Time, because we didn't have the studio, I did even more shooting. I work quite often with a remote, with a little jib arm and a remote head. So I'd find I do a lot, even more off that than I normally do, which is considerable. But even when I'm on a remote head, I'd rather be able to go up to the camera, look through it, and just see exactly what, you know, rather than go back to look at the monitor. But then it's, as I say, it's like where I've come from, you know, and I feel I'm making the transition to digital, where a lot of cameramen now have obviously been brought up on digital, and they don't need those things. I mean, you see kind of, you know, the consumer cameras and different things where the screen's here and you hold the camera like that. Even Anthony Dogmantle I've seen operating like this. He kind of likes doing it, and I'd sometimes do it in a motion capture situation where I could work in animation sometimes. And yeah, there's something to be said for it, but that's not what I was brought up on. And so maybe that's the one thing where I'm still a bit of a dinosaur. I want my optical viewfinder. Well, and thank you for that.
Well, and also it needs to be mentioned, it was not the final release camera, so you have been brave enough to work with a prototype.
That's right. We had two, and Russell Allen. But could you say, no, we don't take any responsibility for these. but they were flawless. We didn't have a problem with them at all. I didn't, no.
Well, that's thanks to my engineers. I do know that one should not offer prototypes for serious production. But I can tell you our prototypes are probably even better than serious products. Because the top engineers are making sure that everything is really tested and fine. And that has a tradition. So Roland Emmerich also was shooting the first feature film shot with Alexa was anonymous, and that also was a prototype, flawless, yes. So beside of the studio on Skyfall, there had been a whole variety on Alexas. There was also an Alexa M,
Yeah, we had, I had one most of the time. Alexander Witt, who's doing second unit in Turkey, he had a couple with him, I think, all the time. Yeah, we had I think we might have had the first two out the workshop. But we had, I mean, I think second unit had, you know, like 8 cameras with them, and sometimes, say, there were days when we had 10 or 11 on first unit. So I think we had, I don't know how many cameras we had. One day we might have had, I don't know, 20-odd cameras or so out one day. Yeah. Very, very few problems, really.
You used the Master Prime lenses as your preferred set of lenses on a film?
Yeah.
Can you comment about how you find lenses on the Alexa in relationship to the performance you know if you shoot 35mm? Is it doing very much the same kind of image portrait, or do you see some differences?
No, it's very much the same. I mean, the thing about the Master Primes is I had, for years I'd shot with the Distagons, you know, which were 1.3, 1.4. And after, when the Cooke lenses came out, I started shooting with those. But then, I think it was when I was doing No Country for Old Men, I got a prototype set of the Master Primes. And you know, we were talking about this the other day. Why do you need such a fast lens with a fast camera like the Alexa's 800 ASA? But I was thinking, actually, I was thinking about that conversation we had afterwards, and I was thinking, well, a lot of In Time was shot with the master primes wide open. A lot of those night scenes in Time was shot at, maybe it was 1.8 or something, or 1.6, but it was virtually wide open. And I do use that a lot, and there's quite a lot of Skyfalls shot quite wide open as well. And I use the master primes because I think they're the sort of cleanest lenses. I always shoot on prime lenses. I rarely shoot on a zoom. I kind of hate zooms. Unless you're actually using it as a zoom. You know, if you're using it, fine. But I hate using a zoom as a variable focus lens because I don't like the flare. I don't like the amount of light it takes in. I don't like the fact it's so far from the lens. It makes the camera that big instead of that big. I like things to be as small and as compact as possible. So the master primes have, I say they're the fastest, cleanest lenses that I've come across. So I've used them ever since that first set of prototypes I had on the country. Yeah.